Hello, it's me again. Great news. We're less than 2 weeks away from the launch of one of my most anticipated games of all time. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is nearly upon us, and I cannot wait. A few months ago, I already put out a review over on Retro Rebounds, and the link is in the description, so we're not gonna do that again here. But I realize there's a lot of you out there who haven't been able to play the first game. Maybe because you're on console and can't stand 30 FPS, rightfully so, or perhaps because you found it too buggy at launch or simply never had the time. But there's also people out there who have played it and need a little refresher on its wonderful story and many interesting characters. Well, fear not, because over the next couple of minutes you'll get a complete breakdown of all the major players and story beats in Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, so that you're fully ready to jump straight into the sequel. And like always, we have to start at the very beginning. And this time, that takes us to the mighty Kingdom of Bohemia, which was ruled by Charles IV. And under his reign, the kingdom was experiencing a golden age. But when Charles passed away in 1378, his son Wenceslas inherited the throne. Now, he was nothing like his father and was so lazy that he even missed his own coronation as Holy Roman Emperor, which really pissed off a portion of the Bohemian nobility. They turned to his half-brother, Sigismund, the king of Hungary, who promptly kidnapped his brother and started pillaging the Bohemian lands, punishing all who were still loyal to Wenceslas. And that's where our story begins, in the year 1403, in the small silver mining town of Skalitz. Because it is right here where we meet Henry, a poor blacksmith's son. Henry's recovering from a great night out when his mom wakes him up because his dad needs some stuff picked up from the local merchants. Instead, Henry and his friends end up throwing shit at a house, beat up the local drunk, and gather some nails for the lovely Theresa. Oh. Henry and his dad finish a sword for Sir Rattay Kobila, the Lord of Skalitz, when the man himself pays them a visit to admire their work. He has a visitor with him, Sir Istvan Toth, who also compliments the sword. The two take their leave while Henry and his dad have a little talk about life in general, when the town suddenly gets attacked by an army of Cumans under Sigismund's command. His commander, Sir Markvart von Aulitz, storms the city center, taking out people left and right, including Henry's parents. Henry flees as fast as he can, quickly saves the lovely Theresa, who's under attack by two Cumans, steals a horse, and rides to the nearby town of Talmberg. With an arrow stuck in his leg, Henry warns the Lord of Talmberg, Sir Divish, and his hot young wife Stephanie of the imminent attack. Later that night, during a storm, Henry gets woken up because there's a gathering of people outside the gate. It turns out Lord Ratzig was able to flee the massacre at Skalitz with a bunch of other survivors and is now on his way to the town of Rattay. Before he takes off, he makes Sir Divish promise that he won't let Henry leave the castle until things quiet down. But Henry doesn't listen and sneaks his way back to Skalitz to bury his parents. When he arrives at the now burned down village, he notices local shitbag Zabishek, who's looting the corpses of his former neighbors. Henry beats him up, but Zabishek manages to flee. A grief-stricken Henry finds the bodies of his parents and breaks down, but gets disturbed by Zabishek, who has quickly returned and brought some unsavory new friends with him. One of them is dressed in black and doesn't seem to be very nice. He steals Henry's sword, and just as he is about to deal the final blow, which would make the game extremely short, the wonderful Theresa heroically shows up. Just as they're about to mock her, the Talmberg police rolls in behind her and disbands the murderous band of outlaws. And this is where the game actually begins. As they roll Henry out on a stretcher, we get to see the opening credits, showcasing the beautiful Bohemian countryside. Next thing we know, Henry wakes up in the mill right outside of the town of Rattay, where Theresa and her uncle, who's a filthy thief like all millers are, have been taking care of him. He goes to see Sir Ratzig in Rattay and also meets Sir Hanush of Lepa, who's the acting lord of the town, while he waits for his arrogant bitch of a nephew, Sir Hans Capon, to come of age. Henry joins the service of Sir Ratzig and gets assigned to the town guard. Before he does that, however, he needs to get some training from Bernard out in the courtyard. Bernard teaches him the basics of sword fighting, and the two quickly move over to archery. While Henry is learning the ropes, local arrogant bitch Hans Capon shows up and challenges him to an archery contest. When that doesn't go his way, he also challenges Henry in the ring. After beating the shit out of each other, Henry rushes up and reports for his first duty as town guard. As evening falls, Henry finishes his round by trying to close up the local tavern, while he gets into yet another fight with Hans Capon. The fights get broken up by Sir Hanash, ordering Henry to accompany Hans the very next day on his hunting trip, which neither of them are very happy about. At dawn, the two depart on the hunt, Hans on horseback and Henry, who doesn't have a horse, running after him. They quickly learn that they might have more in common than at first glance and make a bet who can hunt the most rabbits. Suddenly, during the hunt, they come eye to eye with a boar, and when Hans shoots it, the boar runs off with him in pursuit. Henry is left wandering the woods in search of his missing hunting buddy when he discovers that Hans has been captured by a couple of humans. After a fierce battle with the two swordsmen, Henry rescues his new friend and escorts him back to Rattay, where they can recover from their wounds. Not long after, they get word that a local farmstead in Neuhof has been attacked by bandits, and Lord Rattay sends out Henry to investigate. He gives him a horse, and Henry takes off together with Bernard to see what's up. When they arrive at the farm, they encounter a bloodbath with dead horses and farmhands everywhere. While investigating and talking to the survivors, Henry learns that someone named Ginger might know more. After a wild goose chase through multiple woods, rivers, and camps, Henry finds Ginger, who tells him he recognized one of the bandits since he had a limp. This brings Henry to the town of Uzitz. Asking around the town, it seems that everyone has heard of Limpy Lubosh, who's a bit of a local douchebag. When Henry finds his house, a group of townspeople is already gathered outside. It turns out that somebody beat Henry to the punch and murdered Limpy, so the investigation suddenly takes a dark turn. Henry finds out that Limpy Lubosh might have talked with the local priest, so he sets out to have a little talk with Father Goodwin. And Father Goodwin turns out to be a bit of a wild card and tells Henry they'll talk in the morning. But first, they must drink. And drink they do. And a little fighting. And then more drinking. So much so that the very next morning, Father Goodwin isn't up to the task and asks Henry to perform his sermon instead. Whether this goes right or wrong is up to you, but at the end of it, Father Goodwin tells him that Lubosh told him of a man called Riki. After some more detective work and a whole lot of searching, Henry finds a mortally wounded Riki, who points him to yet another man who might know more, called Timmy. Henry eventually finds Timmy in an old mill. The simpleton finally reveals the location of the bandit camp in an abandoned village called Pribyslavitz. While sneaking in, poisoning the food, and taking out a few random enemies on the side, Henry discovers that bandits aren't the only inhabitants of the camp. There's a whole regiment of Cumans stated there as well, which means this whole thing is way bigger than they initially thought. He reports back to Sir Rattay and Sir Divish and gets ready to kick some ass. As the battle rages on and people on both sides get taken out left and right, Henry finally comes face to face with the man who took his sword. An epic fight between the two breaks out, and when Henry finally gets the upper hand, it turns out Runt no longer has the sword. Meanwhile, while this is going on, another regiment of bandits and Cumans attack the nearby town of Merhoyet. But the villagers managed to fend off the attack themselves and even took one of the bandits prisoner. From him, he learns that there's a mysterious foreign chief who's funding the whole operation with counterfeit money, or groschen as they call it here. Henry then travels to the town of Sasau, where he discovers that a group called the Crimps are recruiting people for a new bandit outfit. He decides to go undercover to find out where these Crimps are based, but in order for them to trust him, he needs to find a bandit who went rogue and is now hiding among the monks in the Sasau monastery. Eventually, after many days of experiencing the monk lifestyle, Henry finds out which one of his fellow believers is a sought-after bandit and either kills him or helps him fake his death. Either way, the Crimps are impressed and reveal that their stronghold is in Vranik. Once again bravely infiltrating behind enemy lines, Henry pretends to be a new recruit and reports to the stronghold's leader, a man called Eric, only to finally come face to face with his real enemy. The foreign chief he's heard so much about turns out to be none other than Istvan Toth, the visitor from the very beginning of the game. He recognizes Henry and takes him prisoner. While torturing him, he not only reveals to Henry that he's the one who has his sword now and is funding the bandits and Cumans to conquer Bohemia so that Sigismund will reward him, but also that Henry has been lied to his entire life. He's not just a simple blacksmith's son, but Lord Rattay's illegitimate heir. That's right, it's a triple whammy of Star Wars revelations here. While Toth and Eric leave Henry to stew on this new information, another familiar face shows up. Local shitbag Zabishek makes a triumphant return, and this time, he's somewhat of a good guy because he rescues Henry and together, they make their way back to Sir Rattay and the other lords. Henry fills them in on what's going on, so the lords gather whoever they can and ride off to the Vranik stronghold in preparation for war. A major battle ensues, and as the corpses pile up and Henry and his allies are victorious, it becomes clear that Istvan Toth is no longer here. The bastard has fled to Talmberg and takes the castle and Lady Stephanie hostage. When our heroes arrive to save the day, Lord Rattay is a little bit overzealous and charges in, which only leads to his own capture. Istvan Toth now holds 2 major hostages and a well-defended castle. Henry and Hans Capon set up a daring rescue mission in the middle of the night, but only manage to find a bunch of other hostages, while Lady Stephanie and Lord Rattay are nowhere to be seen. Sadly, they get discovered, and while they flee, Hans gets shot. In the ass. He's okay. The next morning, our protagonist built a siege camp surrounding Talmberg and even convinced a local engineer to join them and build a trebuchet to tear down its walls. And while the trebuchet is finally almost ready to be used, Henry and his allies get word that Istvan has called in reinforcements. Henry lays down an ambush and quickly makes work of them, but it turns out this was merely a diversion because the siege camp is also under attack. Henry returns just in time to save the day alongside Hans and the other lords, and even manages to capture Eric, who led the attack on the siege camp. While interrogating Eric, it becomes clear that he and Istvan share a very special bond, so much so that their besieged enemy might want his friends, in quotation marks, returned. However, Istvan is a bastard, so he reluctantly refuses, and the very next day, the trebuchet finally gets to come into action. Huge boulders rain down on the castle of Talmberg, and when a breach opens, Henry and his allies fight their way inside, only to realize Istvan is hiding in the highest tower, threatening to kill both Lady Stephanie and Lord Rattay. Negotiating with him seems to be the only way out. They have no choice but to let Istvan Toth go in exchange for Lady Stephanie and the promise that a wounded Sir Rattay will also be set free once they're outside the castle walls. Before he rides off, the bastard Istvan taunts Henry one last time with the sword he stole from him. As the villain departs, Hans and Henry carefully watch which way they're riding. A little while later, the two luckily stumble upon an unharmed Lord Rattay, who was indeed set free as Istvan promised. Hans leaves the reunited father and son to themselves, and the two finally have the heart-to-heart conversation they were both craving for. Back home, Henry has a dream of Martin the blacksmith, the man he fought to be his father for all these years, and thanks him for all he's done. The two say their final goodbye as Martin and his wife enter the afterlife. The next morning, our band of merry heroes get paid a visit by Jobst of Moravia, cousin to King Wenceslaus. Jobst is trying to secure an alliance between the nobles who are still loyal to Sigismund. Henry and Hans get the task to ride to Trotsky Castle, where another noble, Otto von Burgov, lives. They hold a letter asking whether or not his allegiance to Sigismund is still intact. So alongside a small armed entourage, our heroes ride off into the sunset, all the way to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Roll credits. So there you have it, that's Kingdom Come Deliverance. Now this is an RPG, so there are of course a couple of choices that you can make that turn out a little bit different than the canon, but this is pretty much the overall narrative. We're really close to the launch of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 now, and I gotta tell you, I haven't been this excited for a game since The Witcher 3. Literally counting the days until we finally get to experience it all together, so when that finally happens, expect a lot of coverage coming your way right here on this channel. Next week, however, we're taking a little trip to the faraway mystical land of Drova. Now you might have never heard of this CRPG that came out only a few months ago, or its developer, Just 2D Interactive. But hopefully, that's about to change, because what these guys made here is downright magnificent and perfectly captures the spirit of old-time greats like Morrowind or Gothic. So until then, have a great time, my friends.